Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician, and this is Holomancer. Today we want to talk about the latest nerfs to the classic and basic cards.
Our main task is to draw your attention to the main arguments of the developers. Honestly, it seems that the developers are not being honest with us. You've probably already heard many different opinions from streamers and pro players, so we will only discuss the official position of the developers, and provide you with facts and statistics.
But before we start, we recommend that you watch our video about Hearthstone economics, an unusual study, where you will find the answer to the question, how much does Hearthstone really cost?
Alright, gentlemen. Let's begin.
On January 31st, the developers published news on the official website about upcoming balance updates. Here are the main arguments and explanations of the developers.
When we talk about changes, we normally talk about each card individually. This time, we're doing things a little differently. Most of the upcoming changes are happening for the same reason. We think Hearthstone is most fun when strategies are consistently evolving. When basic and classic cards become so broadly effective that they drive what deck styles are considered viable every expansion, then it makes that goal difficult to achieve. When basic and classic cards become this ubiquitous, they take away some of the flexibility players have when building decks, ultimately stifling the diversity of decks we see when playing Hearthstone. The following changes are intended to shift these cards from general purpose auto includes into options that are more likely to be chosen for decks that are focused on strategies that capitalize on what these cards have to offer.
In general, we agree with all of these reasons, but there are a few nuances that worry us. Firstly, I think that it is very important to talk about each card individually. Players must completely understand the problem that a specific card creates in a particular class. This way players can better understand the decisions of the developers, and the direction the class is heading in the future.
Secondly, we have heard all these arguments from year to year, but developers continue to create universal cards that are becoming popular in all decks. Perhaps they believe that this should apply only to the classic and basic sets. But in this case, it may be better to revise all cards from the classic and basic sets once, a massive nerf that would bring all cards to a single new standard of balance. After this, they should stop making overpowered cards. As of now, nerfs look like a tool that developers use to correct balance only when the meta is stagnating.
In addition, we have already heard arguments about auto-including cards some time ago, before Druid cards changing, such as Wild Growth and Nourish, and it really was fair. These cards were included in all Druid decks, regardless of strategy. The exception is Spiteful Druid.
Now let's see if these cards were really as popular as the developers say. We have specific numbers and graphs for the past 16 months.
Every week I process the results of different meta reports, and calculate the popularity of decks, strong archetypes and cards used on the ladder.
Let's start with Equality. This is the most controversial card. Equality does not correspond to the statement of the developers at all. On average, only 23% of all Paladin decks used this card throughout 2018. The peak point of the popularity of this card in the Paladin decks was in May 2018, and was 54%. Now this card is experiencing a new rise in popularity. The average value of the popularity for January was 51%.
Now let's add a graph of the Paladin's class popularity, and see if the popularity of Equality, in Paladin decks, affects the change in popularity of the class as a whole. As you can see, this trend appeared only in the next few months. For this reason, the motives of the developers remain a complete mystery. In addition, to date, popular versions of Odd, Murloc, Secret Paladin decks do not use this card at all.
In the list of the most popular Paladins cards for the last year and a half, Equality ranks only 15th. But we have some more popular cards. For example, in first place is Righteous Protector, a more universal Paladin card. From the S-Classic cards, there is the Divine Favor. The community has long awaited a nerf for this card, but perhaps the developers will send it to the Hall of Fame.
Next, let's look at the Hunter card. Nerfing Hunter's Mark also leaves a lot of questions. The developers have changed this card for the second time. Most likely, the reasons are completely different, with one possibility being the incredible popularity of Hunter.
As you can see, this card was very popular in September 2018, and recently, it once again occupies a very important role in Hunter decks. This was not always the case, however. This card took a special place after the release of Candleshot in December 2017. These two cards have a really strong synergy, and the developers wanted this to be the case.
If you compare the peak of this card's popularity with the chart of popularity of Hunter, then you can see that Hunter's mark doesn't has direct effect on the popularity of the class, although it is an important tool of Hunter decks.
The Hunter does use cards that are truly auto-include cards, such as Animal Companion, Kill Command, and Eaglehorn Bow. Based on the arguments of the developers, all these cards are likely to be sent to the Hall of Fame. Based on the real actions of the developers, all these cards are likely to gradually change when a crisis occurs in the meta game.
Now let's talk about Rogue. As you can see, Cold Blood also cannot be called an auto-include card. The peak popularity of this card was in July 2018.
Nowadays, this card is experiencing a surge in popularity in rogue decks, which in turn does not affect the popularity of the class as a whole. But we also have Pogo, Malygos, Quest, and Thief Rogue archetypes that do not use this card at all. In addition, Rogue has more popular cards such as SI, 7 Agent, Backstab, Leroy Jenkins, and of course, Edwin Van Cleef. Perhaps some of these cards will be sent to the Hall of Fame very soon.
And the last card we want to discuss is Flame Tongue Totem. This card had the highest level of popularity in October 2017, but since April, it has been used only 1/3 of Shaman decks. This is due to the release of the Witchwood expansion in April.
In this period we received the very popular Shudderwock Shaman archetype. Flametongue Totem has doubled its influence over the past month, although at the same time the popularity of Shaman decreased by half. We also have several archetypes today that do not use this card. Examples of these are Shudderwock Shaman, Overload Shaman, Elemental Shaman, and Dragon Shaman.
But we also have two other cards that are more popular. It's Mana Tide Totem and Hex. Also, this nerf can be explained by the high popularity and high win rate of even Shaman in wild mode, but the developers do not mention this in their post.
Here are some conclusions.
Indeed, one can argue for a long time whether the developers have chosen the right cards for nerfs or not, but the arguments and intentions of the developers are undoubtedly unclear.
This indicates a closed nature and lack of willingness from the developers to speak frankly with the players. The arguments that developers have stuck by differ from reality, and are very formal.
Of course, all streamers and pro players have already explained these changes to the community, but such opinions are very subjective.
We will definitely see new interviews with developers where they will describe their motives in more detail, with their traditional abstract manner, but players deserve to know more precise information on the day the news is announced on the official website. So, what are their real motives?
I have my own opinion. Some time ago, Dina Yalla gave an interview to IGN Nordic. The main subject of this interview was previous nerfs. Here are a few fragments.
We have meta reports that come in every single day, and we monitor not only where stuff is, but where is it trending, where do we think things are going to be in a month or 2 months, or where do we think things are going to be in the month leading into the next expansion. And if we feel like that's going to be a really positive environment, we won't make any changes, but if we feel like there's some things we can do to make a major impact, then we will.
And this is what Dean said about the balance of the new expansion.
This week and next week are some of the last weeks that we're working on set balance for the first set of this year.
It can be assumed that the nerfing of some cards is connected to the balance of the new expansion, but the developers do not want to talk about it to us, which is why we get such strange and fairly general arguments.
Of course we needed a nerf. Some time ago in our video, I already stated that the developers are preparing a nerf and we will hear about it soon. Despite the actual diversity of archetypes and the presence of a huge number of cards, the meta has not changed for a long time. Unfortunately, I doubt that these changes will allow new archetypes to emerge. Rather, we will get a slightly different distribution of forces.
And what do you think? How will Hearthstone change after these nerfs?
We created a YouTube poll. Find the button on the screen. Please vote and share your opinions in the comments.
Alright, that's all for today. Thank you for being with us.
And special thanks to Chris for text editing.
We will meet in new videos.
Good luck.